trying to log back in, just as I was meant to be going live with my presentation. But welcome. Thanks to Marta for the previous session, which was great. I mean, I'm not even a translator, and I found that interesting and useful. So that was great. And I think it's also, thanks to Jonathan at Sharp End Training for setting all this up, for getting us going. And a big shout out to the people at the Workshop Turbine as well, because I understand there are people who have watched the entire thing, so are now going into their 25th hour. So I hope you're still awake. and, just you, is it, Jonathan? So you've had a long, lonely night, have you? So, okay, so we're running a little bit behind time now, so I'll get a move on, and I may have to skip a few bits as we go, just because I don't want to bump the next speaker to be late either. So, welcome. My name's Steve Bustin. What I'm going to be talking about this morning is do-it-yourself PR, getting your name in the papers. We're going to talk a bit about what PR is, what it can do for your business, and then I'm going to give you some tips and tricks to start writing press releases, to think of the stories that you've got within your business, and to get them out there. So more than happy to take questions as we go, and hopefully if I can get through it at some speed, we'll still have some time for questions at the end. And I'm more than happy to take comments and questions and things afterwards as well. So in fact, you'll see my Twitter handle is down there at the bottom right-hand side of the screen. I'm at Stephen Brighton, and funnily enough, I'm sat here in sunny Brighton. And more than happy to take comments and questions on there as well. So, and I should just say, those are my two brands, Vada Media and Medical Media Training. So both sort of training brands, doing communications and media training, PR training, presentation skills, all that sort of stuff. Clearly the medical media training is working with the medical sector. So let's go on to the next slide, please. No. Hi there, Jonathan. Are we able to get to the next slide up? Oh, I think I've lost Jonathan. Now I'm going to keep going because I don't know whether anybody else can hear me or not. Jonathan, are you there? Ah, yes, okay. Great. Can you go on to the next slide? Ah, okay. Sorry, it's just taken a while to jump back. Go back a couple. Apologies. That just took. It was just slightly laggy on. And one more. That's it. That's me. This is what people describe as my firing squad shot because I'm up against the wall waiting for it. So just to get to tell you who I am, I'm Steve Bustin, and my background is actually as a journalist. I spent many years at the BBC working on Radio 4 and Radio 5 Live, and then various TV programs like the 1 o'clock news and breakfast news. And I still work as a freelance print journalist. But alongside that, for the last 10 years or so, I've been working in PR. And increasingly doing more and more training, and actually now I've sort of stopped doing PR for people and now train people to do their own. So I train on PR skills and media interviews and presentation skills and that sort of stuff. But that's me. That's who I am, and that's my background. So journalism, PR, communications training, that sort of stuff. Okay, so what are we going to cover? So we're going to look quickly at what PR is, what it can do for your business. We're going to talk about what you're going to talk about in your stories. This is one of the things that most businesses really struggle with, is finding the stories in their business, finding what they're going to talk about, things that journalists are going to be interested in, and ultimately their audience are going to be interested in. So we'll have a look at some of those. We're going to talk about how you actually find the right journalist to reach your right audience. And then we'll talk briefly about a press release, how to write a press release, what needs to go in it, what it looks like, and I can actually give you a link to a press release template that you'll be able to pick up and use if you want to. And hopefully we'll have some time for tips and questions at the end, but we are running a little bit late, so we'll try and get to that as quickly as we can. Okay, next slide, please. Brilliant. So, very easy question. What is PR? Now, PR, public relations, is something that covers a whole range of services. I mean, it really does go from the ab-fab, party, champagne, sweetie, darling school of PR, through to the sort of Peter Mandelson dark arts of spin. All PR, it is about public reputation. It's about what people know about you and your business and what people think about you and your business. For most businesses, however, PR is about media coverage. While they do care about reputation and all that sort of stuff, it's not an easy one to control without media coverage. And by media coverage, we're talking about editorial coverage. Now, editorial is the stuff that's written by journalists. What it's not is the adverts. An advert is something that you pay for, you write, You decide when it appears, you decide where it appears, you decide what it looks like. You have complete control over it. Whether anybody reads it or looks at it is maybe a moot point. We're all very good now at flicking through newspapers, flicking through magazines, and filtering out the adverts. So we tend to focus on the editorial. The editorial has an endorsement implicit in it because it's the journalist has made a decision that this is newsworthy, this is worth writing about and worth you reading about. So there's a couple of ways of sort of illustrating that. First of all, I mean, an advert says, hey, look at me, I'm great. Whereas editorial coverage says, hey, look at these guys, they're great. And as I say, there's an endorsement implicit in that, because actually the journalist or a third party has actually said, this is worthy of your attention. Another way to put it, this was given to me some years ago, is if we're at a party and I walk up to you and say, hi, I'm Steve Bustin, I'm great in bed. That's advertising. If somebody else walks up to you and says, you see that person over there? That's Steve Bustin. He's great in bed. That's PR. Because there's an endorsement implicit in that statement. There's a third-party recommendation, shall we say. And I can almost guarantee if there's one thing you remember from this session this morning, that's probably going to be it. I actually had somebody come up to me a few months ago who'd been to a PR training session I ran years ago and said, oh, you're Steve, aren't you? You're the one who's great in bed. And I thought, well, there's worse reputations to have. So I'm quite happy with that. I thought I might put it on a business card at some point. Anyway, so that's PR. It's about editorial coverage. For most small businesses anyway, that's what it's about. And I should just say, a lot of what we talk about today is equally applicable to individuals. If you're a sole trader, if you're looking to promote yourself as a business expert, it's equally applicable for you as it is to a small business. So, okay, next slide then, please. So, if you will excuse the terrible syntax inherent in this statement, what isn't PR? There's a couple of things I think we should just clear up. PR isn't a free advert. Editorial coverage isn't a free advert. The main difference being that, as I said, in an advert, you can decide what is said. You can decide what goes into it, what the content is. In editorial coverage, you lose some of that control because the journalist is writing it up, and the journalist will decide what they're going to say about you. That may not be 100% favourable. It may not be exactly the language or words you want them to use. And that is the slight risk, is that you do lose a certain amount of control. As soon as you like that story, your press release leaves your computer or you put it out into the ether, you have lost some control because you can never quite guarantee how somebody else is going to write it up. So I think that's worth saying. The other thing about PR is it's not a precise science. I wish I could say to you now, go away, write a press release using the template I'm giving you, and within a number of weeks, you will have media coverage. It's not quite that simple, unfortunately. There are all sorts of variables in PR, and it takes a while to learn them all, to work your way around them. But actually, having said that, it's not rocket science. And I'm sure there are PR people and PR agencies throwing at their hands in horror at that point, going, yes, it is, it's terribly, terribly clever, and we are worth our massive fees. And actually, there are some brilliant PR agencies out there. But in fact, for most small businesses, you don't need to spend huge amounts of money on an agency. Go out and do it yourself, and we're going to get into now to talking about how you're going to go about that. So next slide then, please, Jonathan. So what can PR do for your business? PR, you need to decide, before you start doing any PR, you need to have some objectives in mind. You need to know what it is you want to get out of it. Otherwise, why are you going to do it? For any activity within your business, you need to know why you're doing it. There's got to be a purpose behind it. Now, that purpose may just be because you want to see your name in the papers, and there is a massive ego boost in having PR and seeing your name out there. It's great for staff morale to be able to go into an office and say, look, have you seen us in the paper this morning? Have you seen us online? Because we're being talked about. You work for a company that people are talking about. But actually, you should think about some quite specific and measurable objectives for what you want PR to do for your business. Next slide then, please, Jonathan. Sorry? Yes. I'm not. At the moment, I can't see. I'm still seeing the previous slide, but I'll wait for my. Here we go. So there's the first one. So what can PR do for your business? The major one it can do is it can raise brand awareness. It can help make people find out about your business. If they've never heard of you, they start reading about you, hearing about you, seeing you on TV even, they're going to know who you are, what you do. It can also help boost your personal profile. As I said, this is a lot of individuals are now looking to promote themselves, perhaps as a speaker or as an expert or as a consultant. And actually doing their own PR is a great way to do that, to raise your personal profile so people know who you are. It also will help them find you. Next point, please. Okay, so it can help change the public perception of your business. Now, people may have heard of you, they may not know exactly what it is you do. They may have a misguided image of what you do, or they may actually have heard negative things about you, and you need to try to turn that around into a positive. So one of the things that PR is very good at is helping to change people's opinion of what you do. Maybe people think you are in some way an unethical business or an environmentally unfriendly business. PR can be a great way to help change people's perception and tell them the truth about your business. So it's a really important aspect. If you know that people have got the wrong idea about what you do, you need to help change that perception. As an example, at the moment I'm transitioning my business from being a PR business to being purely a training business. So I'm having to change people's perception of who I am and what I do within my business. Next point, please. I hope other people are seeing this. I'm getting some lags on my screen, so I'm still only seeing the first point at the moment, but I'm going to carry on. Next one is encouraging footfall. If you have a shop or you are consumer facing and you have premises that you want people to come to, PR can be a great way for actually getting people there. You need to put your address in front of people. People need to know how to find you. PR can be a good way to do that. If you're having an event, it's a great way to get people there. To get coverage in local papers, for instance, or on local radio, even local TV, getting footfall there can be a great outcome from PR. If people haven't read about it, haven't heard about it, they're not going to come along. Next point, if you're able to, Jonathan. I'm not sure whether you're seeing these points, but I'm still only seeing the first one, but we'll keep going. Next one, PR can help drive sales. Here we go. That's fine. So here we go, that's it. No problem at all, no problem. So PR can help drive sales. It can help drive sales online if you are an online business, but also can help drive sales offline if you're a shop, if you're a retail business, or a restaurant or cafe, food, hospitality, that sort of thing. So PR can really help to drive sales, and that can be very measurable. You know, you get a couple of pieces of PR coverage that drive people to your website, and actually you'll see the sales go. That's a really important one. And actually on that topic, next point, is that it can help generate web traffic. If you are looking to build traffic to your site, coverage in particularly an online media outlet can be huge. Some of the websites like the Mail on Sunday, or the Daily Mail's website, or the BBC News website, or the Guardian's website, get huge traffic, and you can suddenly get tens or even hundreds of thousands of people clicking through to your website. I've actually seen small business websites fall over having had a link on one of those sorts of sites because their servers just can't cope with that level of traffic. But it is a great way to build traffic, to start getting online coverage, particularly on the major news websites, because that's where you'll get the large traffic from. The next point, however, if we can get the next bullet point up, please, is that it can help boost SEO. Now, something I want to clear up here. You will hear people talking about online PR. What that tends to be is getting links purely for SEO purposes. It's not about editorial coverage. Now links at the moment, I mean, there is some school of thought that says that just volume of links is no longer important. It's actually about quality and the content that they come from. And in that respect, one link on the Mail's website or the BBC website is going to be worth way, way more to your SEO than a dozen links on small news websites scattered across the world. But PR can absolutely help boost SEO, particularly if you're appearing on the really popular, major, important sites that Google ranks very heavily. Next point, please. SPR can help trigger phone inquiries. And if you are looking to get people to call you, you can do that, but make sure you give them the phone number. You'd be amazed how often you see people saying, oh yes, please call us for more details, and there's no phone number. So make sure if you're going to do that, that you actually do give your phone number. And the final one on this page, in terms of what PR can do for your business, you do need to know what you want it to achieve before you start. if otherwise, it's very easy just to start putting stories out there and you think, well, is this actually giving us a return on investment or not? Set yourself some objectives. Think, actually, what we want to do is get people through the door of our shop. We want to generate an extra 10% of web traffic. We want to boost ourselves up the front page of Google by getting editorial coverage with links on really important websites. Think about what it is you're going to achieve, then you can tell whether it's working or not. Otherwise, you're always going to be slightly in the dark. And as I said earlier, PR is not a precise science, and I think that goes for the measurement as well. It's not as easy to measure as some other forms of marketing. So just think about in advance what it is you want to do. Okay, moving on, please. Great. So you're going to do some PR. You've decided that this is a way forward for you. What are you actually going to talk about? Now, this is the bit where a lot of businesses get stuck. They know what's important to them, but that's not always what's important to the journalist, let alone the reader, the audience they want to reach. So, next slide, please. A very pertinent question. What is news? Now, news, because most editorial coverage that you like to get is going to be in the news pages of a newspaper or a magazine or a news part of a website. News is, by definition, what's new. And we forget that. A newspaper is a paper of what is new. What's new today? What's happened today? Maybe what's happened yesterday, maybe what's going to happen tomorrow, but primarily it's what's happening now, what's happening today. And that's what news is all about. It's what's new. So what you've got to start thinking about is what's new in your business. Next slide, please. So there can be all sorts of things that can be new in your business at any given time. And that might be a new product or a new service. Great thing to do. If you're launching something new, you're launching a new product that you want people to know about, you're launching a new service, that can be a great news story, as long as it is genuinely new and not just a little bit of an improvement on something you're already doing or just repeating what somebody else is already selling. It has got to be genuinely new. But a new product or service is a great story. You may have new senior staff. You probably would have seen, particularly in trade press, there's always a page of latest appointments. This is the movers and shakers. This is who's moving from role to role. So, good way to say that actually we've got important people coming into our business, we're growing, that sort of stuff. Those sorts of news stories about senior staff, really good story for trade press. If you've got a new event coming up, definitely newsworthy. Or maybe you've done some new research, you've got some new statistics. Statistics are really important for the media, and it's absolutely worth publicising that. And I'll talk a little bit more about research in a moment. You may have a new website. Now, I almost took this point out because it's getting very hard to get coverage on a new website unless it does something really new, really different. Everybody has a website these days. Everybody updates it every now and again. But in fact, if you are trying to get new coverage for a new website, just think about what difference it's going to make. What is genuinely new and different about your website? Maybe new for you as a business. It's probably not going to be new for everybody else in terms of what it actually does. But new premises, again, good way of telling the world that you're growing, that you're moving, that you're arriving in a new area. A new promotion, if you've got a sale or you're doing special offers, they can be a news story. You have to make sure it doesn't sound too much like an advert, but it can work. A new partnership. If you're forming a new business partnership or you've done a new deal, great story. Particularly if it's a big deal, if it's a partnership with a well-known organisation, maybe you've won a government contract, that sort of thing. Those can be great stories for any business. And I've done here a new trend. If you have spotted a new pattern, something you haven't seen before, maybe in the way that customers are buying or what customers are buying or the inquiries you're getting, that can be the basis of a story too. It may even be that you see something like a new economic trend, you see something happening nationally, and actually you're able to illustrate that. That can be a really good way to generate a news story. Okay, so that's what can be new in your business, and I would hope that everybody watching would be able to see at least one of those that's relevant to them and their business at some point. There may be others. That list could be twice as long, and if we were in a sort of seminar situation, we would actually brainstorm that and come up with far, far more. But I'm hoping most people would see at least something in there that's relevant to them. So if we could have the next slide, please. But, and it's a big but, what if you haven't got anything new going on in your business at the moment? You haven't always got new stories. You haven't always got new products, new services. You're not always moving into new premises, haven't got a new event, all those sorts of things. So there are ways that you can start to generate news stories by really generating something new. So next slide, please. And first point. So the best way to, or one of the classic way to do it, is to do some research. Do a survey and generate some new statistics. I'm sure if you pick up, particularly if you pick up newspapers in the UK like Metro or the Mail or the Evening Standard, they love new statistics. They will often say, research out today suggests that ... You know, a survey released this morning finds that ... 8 out of 10 Britons do this. 9 out of 10 businesses do that. Surveys and statistics are a great way to generate a news story. Very easy to do these days on SurveyMonkey, things like that. A couple of caveats. If you're doing a business-to-business survey, you probably need to be looking at getting at least 100 responses. If you're doing something around consumers, your sample size needs to be as big as possible, and ideally over 1,000. So just think about how you're going to reach people and get them to take part in your survey. If you've got an email mailing list, great. That's a really good way to do it. But I would always suggest you incentivize that survey. So offer people something for taking part, but not just a 2-hour free consultation with you or something, depending on the business service you offer. Offer them something people would actually like. Offer them a bottle of champagne or an iPad or something like that, and then I'll have a draw at the end for everybody who took part. That information and data is really valuable to you, so it's worth spending a little bit of money on a prize or a gift that somebody can get for taking part. So doing surveys, really good way to generate a news story. Make sure that they are genuinely surprising, that your results don't just confirm what you want them to confirm, and actually people think, well, you would say that anyway, wouldn't you? So it's think about something different, something that hasn't already been said, something that would be useful to people in your industry or useful to your customers to know, and then do a survey. And that sort of thing. We're more than happy to talk about that later on if we've got time for some questions. So, next point, please. Express an opinion. If you are, particularly if you're trying to set yourself up as an expert, as a media expert or an expert in your field, express an opinion. Have something to say. Let people know that you are an opinion former, that people should listen to your opinions, that you count, that what you think matters. So it can be a great way to send out a press release saying, you know, Bob Jones, head of such and such a consultancy, said on the latest economic figures, his response was, and here's your opinion. Particularly if it's going to be a controversial opinion, rather than just saying the same old, or the things that everybody else is going to say. Next point is that you can also respond to someone else's opinion. You can, if one of your competitors even, or somebody else in the industry hasn't expressed an opinion that you disagree with, let people know that you disagree with them. Because actually you can get into a little bit of a, maybe not a Barney, but you can get into a bit of discussion. It often happens through the letters pages of magazines that people start trading opinions. So it is worth responding to other people's opinions as well. Next point, please, Jonathan. I don't know if that one's just lagged behind or whether it's... And again, done that one. Ooh, there we go. Oh, okay, let's do those two. Fair enough. Okay, great. Lovely. Thank you. All right. So something else you can do if you're looking to create a new story is you can piggyback on someone else's story. So this is where you would, if somebody else has put out a story and you think that actually you have something that could add to it, you can do that. It might be that actually there is a national story and you can find a local angle on it and piggyback on it that way. So for instance, maybe the government has put together a new bill that is going to regulate the sector you happen to work in. You can then put out an opinion, or you could put out a story about how you've surveyed your customers, and actually they don't want that type of regulation. They think it's going to harm the way the service is provided. That's the sort of thing you can do. You can take somebody else's story and piggyback on it, take it forward, move it forward, give it a new spin. Particularly if you can find a local angle on a national story, or vice versa. Try and find, go to the national press as a way of illustrating what's happening to you locally. It can be a great way to do that. And there's all sorts of national stories you can piggyback on, everything from awareness days and awareness weeks, right through to government legislation, and just keep an eye on the news agenda and think, could I respond? Could I actually take part in this news story? Okay, next point, please. And another one, a good one. Issue a warning. or some advice. And I'll give you an example of this. I did some work a couple of years ago with a dermatologist. Now, every spring, every dermatologist puts out a press release saying top dermatologist warns people to remember to put on a suntan lotion when they're on the beach, when they're on holiday. It's got to a point where it doesn't make any coverage anymore because we've heard it all before. That sounds awful because it is important, but actually the papers struggle to find a new way of putting it out. So what I did with this dermatologist is we put out a press release in December saying, treat the ski slopes like the beach. Don't forget to put on your factor 30 before you go skiing. And that got coverage all over the place because in December that was really unusual advice that people just hadn't heard before. Although I think it's common sense to wear suntan cream while you're out skiing, it just hadn't really been said in the newspapers before. So we got coverage in the Telegraph and the Mail and all sorts of women's magazines. So issuing a warning or some advice that again is not just the same old, it's not what people would necessarily expect. Get it out there, and again, it's a really good way to say, I'm an industry expert, I'm the person you should be listening to. And last point on this page, please. And last one is that you can also contribute to a feature. Features tend to be a bit more discursive, they tend to be about trends, background, that sort of thing. A couple of things you can look at: forward feature lists. A lot of trade magazines will actually issue a list of what they're planning to write about this year. So if you go, it's normally on their website in their advertising section, they will have a forward feature list, and it will list all the features they're planning to write between now and the end of the year. And it is perfectly acceptable, if you see one that is relevant to your area, to call the features editor or drop them an email and just say, I see you're writing about this topic, can I have a chat with you about it? I'd like to contribute. You can also use a service called Response Source, which is responsesource.com, which is a subscription service where journalists actually send out requests for information, case studies, experts, samples, all that sort of thing, and you subscribe by channel. So there's a transport channel and a women's health channel and a men's channel and a gardening channel and that sort of thing. It's about £200 a channel per year. It's actually very good, but go and explore that. That's something to look at. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so hopefully you now think you've got a story, whether it's a news story or it's something that you're going to generate. First of all, though, it does have to pass two very important tests before you even think about putting it into a press release. Next slide, please. The first one is, does it pass the so what test? Do you read that story and just go, so what? Meh. You would say that. Is it actually interesting? Pass it around a few people. Maybe ask somebody in your family who doesn't work in the business. Just say, would you find this interesting? If they're not sure, then it probably isn't a story, because if they don't find it interesting, and particularly if you don't find it interesting, journalists and their readers won't find it interesting either. So do just think, does it pass the so what test? You also have to think about, does your story have truth? Now, by this, I'm not saying don't lie, although, for heaven's sake, don't lie, please. Lying in a press release, really bad news. It will get found out. But if we can have the next slide, please. Truth stands for these things. First of all, topicality. As I said, news is about what's new. So what is it that makes your story topical? Why should a paper write about it today or this week rather than having written about it 3 weeks ago or in 3 weeks' time? What is it about it that makes it now? Is it a topical story? That's one of the main elements of newsworthiness. Is it topical? Why now? So just think about, what is it that makes it now? If the event is happening next weekend, that gives it topicality. If the launch is tomorrow, that gives it topicality. If the launch was a month ago, it's no longer topical. You've missed the boat on that one. Relevance. Relevance can have two different angles. Relevance can be geographic. So if you're talking to a local paper, you've got to make sure you're relevant to their patch. So every local paper will have a map on the wall in their newsroom with a big red line around it. If you're inside that red line, you're in their patch, you're relevant. If you're outside that red line, you're not. So, for instance, I'm based in Brighton. The Brighton Argus will have exactly that map on their website. So if I'm sending out a story about Brighton, great, it's in their patch. If somebody who's living in London sent out a story and sent it to them, unless there is an obvious Brighton angle, they're going to ignore it because it's not relevant. Relevance can also be about topic, however. So, for instance, if you are sending a story to Legal Week, the magazine for lawyers, it's got to have relevance to lawyers. It's got to be on their topic patch, if you like. Otherwise, they're not going to be interested. So if you send them a press release all about the service you run for accountants, they're going to take one look at it and think, not relevant, not going in. If, however, you talk about how you are working with lawyers to improve a certain aspect of their business, then it's going to be relevant. So you've got to make sure your press release or your story has relevance. It should be unusual. This is largely about the so what test. It's got to make people think, oh, I didn't know that, hadn't expected that. So that will really help to give your story weight if it's unusual, rather than just same old, same old. If it causes trouble, bit of controversy really sells, that will really add to the story as well. If it just sort of mixes things up a little bit, you've got to be prepared to put your head above the parapet, but it can be a great way to get interest. If you're not scared of expressing an opinion, you'll go a long way. And finally, it should have human interest. Your story must actually be about people. Even as businesses, when we're reading the media, when we're absorbing news, we're doing so as an individual. So we will always look at it and think, what's in this for me? What am I going to get out of this? How does this benefit me and my business? So make sure that your story has human interest. So that's truth. Next slide, please. So, change of colour because we're changing topic. So we're now going to think about who we're going to talk to. Who are we actually going to try and reach with our news story? Who are we actually trying to influence, and what action do we want them to take? Next slide, please. Now, this is the pattern I normally see people take. They'll think about the outlet. They'll think about the media outlet. So, for instance, oh, I always read the Telegraph, therefore I want to be in the Telegraph, therefore I'm going to go and find a journalist on the Telegraph to talk to, and my story's going to go out to the audience who read the Telegraph. Now, I do a lot of work with surgeons, for instance, and that's a story I hear with them a lot. Oh yes, I always read the Telegraph, therefore I want to be in the Telegraph. Now, I point out to them that actually their audience is women aged 20 to 40 who are coming in for Botox or skin treatments, and they don't tend to read the Telegraph. So actually, they are talking about Botox and skin treatments to an audience that tends to be 50 plus and less interested in that type of procedure, so they're reaching the wrong audience, so thus it doesn't work. So they've gone for the outlet first, and it is often driven by ego. It's, oh, that's what I read, so that's where I want to be seen. But actually, you need to think about your audience. Excuse me. So can we go to the next slide, please? So this is the pattern. Okay, that's jumped a bit. Arrows have gone AWOL, but never mind. So this is the way it should go, if you'll excuse the way the arrows have dropped out of the graph there. So you should start with your audience. Think about, who am I trying to reach? Think about, who do I need? Who walks into my business? Who are my customers? Who are the majority of my customers, at least? Think about them, then think about what media outlet they read or watch or listen to or click on. Then find the journalist on that outlet that you need to talk to, and that way you'll reach the right audience. So start with your audience. If you're not absolutely sure what your audience reads, ask them. Maybe make it part of a little survey. Ask them when they're in your business, if you're in your shop or whatever. It's actually quite an easy question to ask. If people do come to you, ask them where they saw you, and you'll soon start to see patterns if people have said, oh yes, I saw you in such and such a paper or such and such a magazine. So think about your audience, then decide what outlet you need to go into to reach that audience. So it may not be an outlet that you're particularly familiar with. So for instance, a lot of surgeons who are doing Botox and skin treatments actually need to be in the Sun and the Mail on Sunday. They don't tend to read those papers, but actually that's where their audience lies. And that's when they get covering those publications, that's when they see people ringing up, walking through the door, making appointments. So next slide, please. So there are lots and lots of media options open to you, and we'll go straight on to the next slide. Here is just a very, very small selection. I mean, clearly you've got TV, radio, newspapers, magazines, and online. They could be local, they could be regional, they could be national, they could be aimed at the consumer, or they could be aimed at trade and other businesses. So, and often they can be a cross-reference of those. So, for instance, you might have national TV, regional newspapers, national magazines, local magazines, consumer magazines, trade magazines, etc., etc., etc. So you do need to think about, who am I trying to reach, and where's the best place for me to appear to actually reach those people. Next slide, please. So, top tip for you. I would choose a maximum of 5 key journalists and concentrate on them. It's very tempting to take a scattergun approach to PR. Just send out your press release to 600 journalists and just hope that something sticks. Much, much more effective to choose 5 maximum, and even just 3 key journalists who you know right for the audience you want to reach, and concentrate on them. Make sure you've got their contact details right. Make sure you reach out to them on Twitter, on social media, those sorts of things. Next slide, please. Now, I'm going a little bit faster than I was going to today because I know we're running a little bit late because we had some technical problems, but hopefully this is all sort of sinking in. And as I said earlier, I'm more than happy to take questions and chat about this afterwards if necessary. So, where are you going to find the right contacts for the journalist you want to reach? The obvious one here is in the publication they write for. And you'd be surprised how few people get that. But if we can go on to the next slide, please. You'll see here, this is the editorial contacts for a magazine that actually is no longer published. It was called Brand New You. It went down a couple of years ago. But that's one of the reasons I use this now, because I think it would be unfair for me to suddenly start passing out journalist contacts without their knowledge. So this is what's often called the masthead, or sometimes called the flannel panel. And something like this will appear certainly in every magazine, in most newspapers, and you can then find them online. So obviously what you've got here is you've got an editorial director, and you can see from her email address that it's not actually specific to the publication, which was called Brand New You. Whereas Rachel Lloyd, the deputy editor, her email address is actually relevant to the magazine. That suggests that Rachel is probably a better person to email details of your story than Lisa. Lisa probably oversees a number of titles, is going to be pretty hands-off with choosing which stories go in which magazines, whereas Rachel is much more engaged with Brand New You magazine. Excuse me. You might also decide you want to contact Rebecca Gooch, who's the features editor, if you're wanting to talk to her about a feature. And it's obviously pretty simple to work out that her email address is likely to be rebecca.gooch@brandnewyoumagazine.com, because you can see the format from Rachel's. And that's absolutely fair to do that. The other person it might be worth contacting is down the bottom, Julie Venice, who's the editorial assistant. Now, the editorial assistant is the office junior, but they do some writing, and they are very keen to progress. They will often have more time to chat to you than the people at the top of the list, the editors and people who are very, very busy people. So it can often be worth talking to the editorial assistant, get to know them a bit, ask them, who's the best person for this story? Is this the sort of thing your magazine would write about? Who should I send it to? She will often say, oh, send it to me, and I'll then pass it on. It just means you've got a much warmer entry in rather than just cold calling. The other nice thing about editorial assistants is they have this lovely habit of getting promoted. And Julie is, I believe, deputy editor now on, I think it's on one of the equine magazines. So actually, if that was your sector, you could follow her up, and you can then start talking to her in a much more senior role. And I've certainly got people I talk to on some of the big women's magazines who I used to talk to when they were virtually the work experience person, and now they're deputy editors and editors. And it's just a good way to build long-term relationships with people. Every website will also list the contact details. Most magazines and newspapers, their websites will list the individuals. For instance, the Guardian's website does have a list of all the journalists and what their specialisms are. And it's always worth trying to find the right person with the right specialism to talk to. So if you know that you've got a health story, try and find the person who writes about health. If you know you've got a science story, an education story, or a business story, find the right person in that publication to talk to. It doesn't take much to actually hit Google and find out who these people are. Pick up the publication, read it. Notice who's writing about what. A lot of publications, such as The Guardian, at the end of the pieces will actually often have the journalist's email address or their Twitter handle, so it's very easy to get hold of them. I would just say, if nothing else, just ring the publication and just ask. Ask the person who answers the phone, who do I send a story about this to? And if we can go to the next slide, please. This is another resource you may want to use. MediaUK.com is a free website that lists pretty much all the UK media, magazines, newspapers, broadcast. It doesn't have much depth of data. But it will normally have a phone number and a website and sometimes an email for the editor. So it can be a good starting point to research the journalist that you want to talk to. And then you can go ahead and follow the link through to their website and then explore in more detail to find the right person. Next slide, please. So, another question. Is the press release dead? You will hear some PR professionals say, oh no, the press release is dead, it's no longer in use. I disagree. I disagree really quite strongly. 9 times out of 10, if you ring a journalist and say, oh, I've got this great story for you, the first thing they will say is, can you send me the press release? They are still the lifeblood of PR, particularly if you're talking with trade press or with local press, and even really national magazines and newspapers. They still want a document that brings together all the information about the story in one place. So I still think it's important to write one. Next slide, please. So this is what should go into your press release. I'm hoping you can see this. I'm still seeing the previous slide, but I think it's probably just lagging again. So, how to write a press release. First thing, here we go. First point. What it needs is, you need to follow the 5W rule. This is a classic. What, where, when, who, and why. So what is this story about? What is the story? What are the main points? That sort of thing. Where? Where is this relevant to? Particularly if you're writing for local press, but where is the event happening? Where is the shop? Where is the thing you want people to come to? Where is the event? When? So this is both about topicality. When is this story happening? Why is it relevant? Why is it topical now? But also, if there's an event, when is it happening? Make sure there's a date in there. Again, a lot of press releases come out about events without a date. Who is sending this press release and who's it about, but also who's it relevant to? And why? Now, why is an interesting one. Why is often where the human interest comes into it. Why is this story happening? Why is this event happening? Why is this product launch important? Why is this new website different? Why is a great question to answer in a press release. I would also add a cheeky another one, which is how. How is this happening? Has you got funding? Has there been a new deal? How can also be quite a useful question to answer in a press release. If we can go on to the next point, please, Jonathan. There we go. So your press release needs a headline. It needs to have something at the top that summarizes the story below it. The headline will also be the subject line of your email if you're going to email the press release out, and that's how most press releases are still sent. If you are emailing press releases, put the copy in the body of the email. Don't send it as an attachment. Attachments don't get opened. The number of press releases I receive that just say press release in the subject line, then there's an attachment, I don't open them. I don't want to take that risk. So the headline needs to be a short, pithy summary of the story, something that's going to capture the journalist's attention and really make them take notice and want to read more and find out more about your story. Most journalists will get dozens, if not hundreds, of press releases a day, so you really do need to make sure yours stands out. Next point, you then need to have a summary in the first paragraph. The first paragraph is often the only bit that will get read beyond the headline. So make sure that first paragraph sums up the story. A new piece of research released today by Bob Jones Limited has found that 9 out of 10 businesses like networking as their main source of business generation. That would be a perfectly good summary for your headline. And it's it is one of those things that it is the only thing that will get read often. So make sure that it sums it up. What I often see is press releases that start with Joe Blogs Limited was started in 1973 and has been running since then very successfully, now has 2 factories and 3 shops, and actually that's background. Get to the point. Make sure that you don't bury the story right down in a lower paragraph. Next, you need a call to action. Call to action is letting people know what you want them to do. Visit this website for more details. Go here, ring this number, buy tickets on this number or at this box office. Tell people what you want them to do. Spell it out. Don't expect people to extrapolate it, because they won't. Next, I think we're a couple behind on the points on the slide, but the next one is quotes. Include a quote in your press release. There we go. A quote is normally from the main person involved in the business. That may be the managing director. If you're sending something out that's specific to one particular person in the business, have the quote from them. So if, for instance, you've got a researcher and you're putting out a piece about research, make the quote from the researcher, make it from the relevant person. Case studies. Case studies are the lifeblood of PR at the moment. Case studies are where you have a client or a customer who can illustrate what you're talking about. So if you've launched a new product or a new service, have a case study of a customer who's used it, who's tried it. How did they find it? How did they change their business? How did it change their lives? That sort of thing. It's particularly true if you're doing something consumer focused. The papers would rather have a consumer talking about it than just hearing from you as the managing director, because they'll always sort of think, well, you would say that, wouldn't you? Whereas a consumer is seen to be more independent. Next, you need some images. Make sure your images are exciting. Make sure they're fun, not just boring shots of people in suits, head and shoulders. I once had a story which got half-page coverage in the Financial Times, it wasn't the most interesting of stories. It was about a new startup in London. But actually, it got half page because the photo we had of the two managing directors was taken in a mirrored lift. So there was just lots and lots and lots of reflections in the background. So it was a really stunning photo. And the journalist on the FT said that's the reason you got half a page was because your photo was so different to anything else our photo desk normally sees. So do think about getting some interesting photos taken. And finally, your press release needs contact information, and that needs to include some out of hours information. So the media doesn't work 9 to 5. They are always they may need to call you at 7 or 8 o'clock in the evening. They may need to call you first thing in the morning. So make sure there's a mobile number on there. There's nothing worse as a journalist when you're on deadline, ringing somebody up, and all you get is the voicemail that says, "Our office is now closed until 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. Please call back then." If that's the case, I'll call your competitor, and they'll get the coverage. So make sure you've got 24/7 contacts. Okay, next slide, please, Jonathan. And on to the next slide. There we go. So that is a press release template for you. That's sat on my website at the moment, vadamedia.co.uk/press-release-template. It's very, very simple. It really just asks you a series of about 7 or 8 questions to talk you through how a press release should be structured. Have a look at it. By all means, give it a try. If you've got any queries about it, drop me an email and I'll talk you through it. But I hope that's a useful tool for you. Next slide. So just coming towards the final hurdle now, because I know we're running out of time. So managing your PR campaign, and we'll go straight on, please, Jonathan. Just some tips about managing your PR. And if you want to bring up the bullet points. So have one person in the business responsible for PR. Make sure that if a journalist calls, everybody in the office knows who to pass that call to. What you don't want is the work experience person on the phone to the journalist from the national paper saying, "Oh, well, yeah, no, they're very unhappy here, and I don't think the staff are getting on very well, and oh no, I think they're losing money." You need to make sure that you're in charge of who's talking to it. So have one person in the business responsible for all PR activity. But make sure that all your marketing and communication messages are consistent. If you're doing advertising, if you're doing direct mail, if you're doing email marketing, if you're doing social media work, make sure that all your marketing activity and your PR are saying the same things. You don't want adverts that say buy product A while all your PR activity says buy service B. It just makes for a very disjointed message and you will confuse your customers very quickly. Next, I would suggest that you log all your media contacts. If you do meet a journalist at a conference, if a journalist does call up looking for input of some description, if you have put out a press release and a journalist has responded positively, make sure that you collate all their contacts into one place. And that means that next time you've got a press release to put out, you've got those contacts ready and it's people who've heard about you, they're warm leads. So bring together all your media contacts so you've got a media database that's in-house. Next, I would say try to develop a relationship with the journalists you have contact with. If you see them at conferences, take them for a drink, buy them coffee, have a chat with them, remind them of who you are. Don't forget, you may know who they are, but they may not know who you are because they've only ever had emails from you, never actually met you. But do get to know them a bit so that you're on their radar, so that when you do ring them with a story, they remember you. They'll say, "Oh yes, I know you. You gave me that great story last month." Next, I'd say a real no-no, don't add journalists to your email newsletter list unless they ask. It's a really, really bad form just to add a journalist's email address into your database so they get their email newsletter. Journalists don't have time to start sifting through your newsletters to try to find the stories. It's just really bad form. Next, I'd say don't deluge journalists with press releases. One a quarter is about right for most businesses. Maybe one every other month, and it depends how strong the stories are. If you've got great news stories that are very different from each other, then one every other month would be fine. Even one a month if they were very different. But for most businesses, aim for one a quarter. That's a good way to go. So it's worth planning out your PR over a year. Think about what stories you've got coming up and when you're going to put them out. And finally, on this slide, evaluate your PR activity. Stop and think: is it working? Are we reaching the right audience? Are we seeing people clicking on our website, turning up to events, walking through the door? If it's not working, change what you're doing. Don't just stop. A lot of businesses, they'll put out one press release, don't get the coverage they want, and never do it again. But actually, PR is a long-term marketing strategy. It's something that will build. Once you start getting coverage, it will snowball. Once people start hearing about you, it will definitely snowball and you'll get more coverage and it becomes easier to get more coverage. So just think about, if it's not working, maybe the story's wrong. Maybe you're reaching the wrong journalist or the wrong outlet. Maybe you're not actually reaching the right audience at all. So think about what you can change. So, with about a minute left, we'll just go on to the next slide, and then in fact, we just pop straight on to the next one, which is the final slide, and I will just wrap up. So, that's me. It is about 11 o'clock, so I do need to wrap up. That's my email address. By all means, drop me a line, or my Twitter handle's down there in the bottom right. And if you're up for, if you need some PR skills training, if it's something you think you'd like to explore more, what I've just done in an hour is normally a full day's training course. So, and we actually get people to write press releases and all that sort of stuff, but also do presentation skills and media interviews and social media. So I'm more than happy to chat to people about any of that. So I think we've probably run out of time, unfortunately, because we started late because of the technical problems. But if anybody's got any questions, Jonathan, I'm more than happy to tackle them. Otherwise, we'll do that. No problem. Great.